Well, it's good to be with you guys this morning, and you've seen a lot of me already, and you get to see a little bit more, so good job. No, Bud is on vacation, having some much-deserved rest, so just continue to pray for him and his family that they have a good week and weekend, and we're just happy that you guys joined us on 4th of July weekend, and I really only see one patriotic tie, and that's Mr. Dilling, so good job, Mr. Dilling, for that patriotic tie. I really love it. I don't have one, so I'll have to get one. Maybe we'll have to match. Oh, yeah, Mr. Nagelkirk has one, too. I didn't see it. Oh, that's a good one, too. That's got like an eagle. All right, now everybody's showing me their patriotic ties. All right, so a lot of people have patriotic ties, and that's because it's the 4th of July. All right, fine, whatever, you know. So I got kind of a weird story to share with you this morning. We're in Daniel chapter 3. It's the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So try to focus in. I know it's a story that we all know and love, and we tell downstairs a whole lot. So I'm really excited. But I got a little bit of a personal story to start with. So when I was 19, I was in Virginia Beach helping with a church plant. And I just ended up working at one of these places that you just kind of go in every day, just not knowing what level of bizarre is going to happen. Like, something's going to go down. Like, you know, somebody's going to do something crazy, or, you know, the food. It was a restaurant, the food's not going to come out right, or, you know, there was just inevitably something was going to go wrong. And the name of that place was called Fire Ninja. And so Fire, or Ninja Fuego, as my mom calls it. She likes to call it that. But so I'm in Virginia Beach helping with this church plant. And I'll tell you how I got the job. So it wasn't quite paying the rent at Chipotle, and although I gained a few inches in my waist, I think. So Chipotle is delicious, but it's high in calories. So I'm taking out the garbage at Chipotle, and Fire Ninja was just like 2 bays down in like one of those strip mall kind of things. And so I'm in like the back alley, like loading garbage, you know. And the manager of Fire Ninja is out there smoking a cigarette, right? And so I would just kind of strike up a conversation, and I was like, hey, you guys wouldn't be hiring right now, would you? And he's like, oh, yeah. And, you know, it was a kind of an upscale sushi place. And so, you know, the tip potential was a little bit more than what I was used to. So he was like, yeah, you could just start immediately. Yeah, we actually need people right now. And so I was like, oh, okay, great. You know, and so I mentioned I was 19, right? Okay. So when you're 19, you think it's totally normal to go to a job interview in an alley surrounded by garbage. You know, like that's just normal for you. And so I thought nothing of it. I walked in and told my boss, gave my 2 weeks notice at Chipotle. It's like, all right, I'm out of here. You know, well, in 2 weeks, I'm out of here. And so I put in my 2 weeks notice, and so I worked my 2 weeks, and I show up at the hostess podium, like for my first day, right? And I walk up there, and I'm like, hey, I'm looking for Mike, the manager. And she's like, oh, yeah, he got fired like a week ago. And I'm like, what? And so come to find out that he didn't tell anybody that he hired me, or I mean, he didn't really hire me. He just sort of said yeah to the guy carrying garbage. So I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, I don't have a job. So I talked to the manager. I begged and pleaded, and they were gracious enough. They gave me a job. I worked that day, and I don't know how that happened. That was certainly the Lord watching out for me. But so I'm at this job for a few months, and things are going well, but it's just bizarre. Like, there's just, like, I was only one of 3 Americans who worked there. The other guy was like the bartender at this, like, the side. His name was Mike, and he would just like show up whenever, you know, and leave whenever, and you know, he was just really lazy. And then the other guy who was American was named Andrew, and Andrew was 47 years old, and he was our bus boy. And I think it's great. He's got a job, and I mean, he's working hard, and he was a good worker. But if you're 47 and you're bussing tables, like, you've made a wrong turn somewhere, right? Like college may have been a better option. Anyway, so that was the other 2 guys. Everybody else spoke Chinese or very broken English. So I'm working there. Our boss was just crazy. It was this short guy named Tony, and he was like 5'2", and he was like super intense. He just like throw stuff, and he'd get mad all the time. And his wife, who was the acting manager sometimes, she was like 6'2". So there's like this height discrepancy between the two of them. But they both kind of had the same temperament. They got along great. So she was terrifying. He was terrifying. And it was last week. One more quick story. So I remember my dad one time was helping me with my taxes. And I had worked there, and I went and asked Tony for my, tax documentation. And he was like, I called him on the phone, and he was like, yeah, we don't do that. And then he hung up the phone. And I'm like, you don't do taxes? I don't know. So I don't know if the IRS is out there trying to get me. I'm sure it's because of Fire Ninja. So anyway, so this has something to do with our story. So I promise. But before I get into that, I have one more thing to share with you about Fire Ninja. So I Googled Fire Ninja this week just to see if it was still there. And I couldn't help but share these. Okay, so these are reviews on Google for Fire Ninja. So here's Brett C. says this. I waited over 5 minutes after being seated, and the server never came. So I don't know if he's still there or what, but he didn't get sushi, and he was mad about it. So this one, Fanny, and you can tell she's probably a grandmother or something. She loves to say nice things about people, but she was disappointed. So this is how she says it, trying to be really nice. How do I start? Well, the place is lovely, and the ice water was cold. Other than that, I think the place has gone slightly downhill. If you're plugging the ice water being cold, okay. All right, so Dave is a little more forward. Dave says this, the worst, don't go. Instead, go to Misako's at Lehman's Plaza, just a few miles down the road. He's plugging somebody else's restaurant. So, but this is my favorite one. Annie says this. She said, worst period, service period, ever. I would rather have someone pelt uncooked rice and fish heads at my face while walking across broken glass. So she was clearly disappointed with her sushi. I don't know how anyone could screw it up that bad, but it was nuts. It was nuts, and you might call it a hostile work environment. It was the boss, the coworkers, the customers. It was just crazy all the time. And we're talking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they kind of found themselves in a similar situation. So let's jump in Daniel chapter 3, if you want to turn there. The last few weeks we've been talking about Daniel. And if you remember last week, Daniel gets this high position in the court of Nebuchadnezzar. And so what we find in the beginning here is that Daniel hooks up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego with a job. So they're in charge of the whole province of Babylon. Excuse me. Oh, all that singing and then talking after, it's horrible. So if my voice cracks, don't make fun of me, okay? So here's Daniel hooked up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego with this new job. They got this dream job, right? Oh, can you do the slides for me? Sorry, I don't have the clicker. So they land in their dream job, right? Babylon at this time is the most powerful nation in the world, right? And actually, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, this is the area that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were working at. So this is a big deal, right? So they have this dream job, much like I thought. I was I'm going to earn a whole bunch of money at Fire Ninja, right? Only to kind of watch it disintegrate around us. So they're working for this guy, and things are going smooth until one day their boss, King Nebuchadnezzar, decides to erect a 90-foot golden statue as an idol, right? And then he makes a law that requires everyone to bow down and worship it whenever they hear the music. So let's just read it. Daniel 3, 4 through 12. So the herald loudly proclaimed, "This is what you are commanded to do, O peoples, nations, and men of every language. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship the king or the statue will be immediately thrown into the blazing furnace." Therefore, as they heard the sound of the horn and flute and zither and lyre and harp and all kinds of music, all the peoples and nations and men of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. All right, so here's the part where we need to focus a little bit. So at this time, some of the astrologers, remember these guys last week? Okay, they came forward and denounced the Jews, and they said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You have issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn and the flute and the zither and the lyre and harps and pipes and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold. And whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into the blazing furnace. But there are some Jews who you have set over your affairs in the province of Babylon." And then they name drop here. Thanks. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? "And they pay no attention to you, O king, and neither do they serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." So here are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're being good Jewish boys, right? They're loving God, worshiping God. And these horrible coworkers of theirs start tattling on them, right? Have you guys ever worked with people? Maybe don't raise your hand. I don't know. Maybe they might find out somehow. But we've all had coworkers kind of like that, right? They're just meddling in everything, right? To make them look better and make you look worse, consequently. And these are the same guys, remember, that botched the whole dream interpretation thing and got a bunch of themselves executed. So I think they're kind of out for revenge a little bit, looking to just stick it to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they're just finding themselves in this really sticky situation. I mean, having this dream job now doesn't look quite so great anymore. So let's read on, and we'll see something here. So 3:13 through 15. "Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so they were brought before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar said to them, 'Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now, when you hear the sound of the horn and flute and zither and lyre and pipes and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I have made, very well. But if you do not worship it, you'll be thrown immediately into the fiery furnace. And what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?'" Whew. I think Nebuchadnezzar needs to kind of chill out a little bit, right? I mean, he's pretty intense. He's kind of a loose cannon. And we've all had bosses like this, haven't we? Or people in our lives, maybe parents, I don't know. Some teenagers up there. Right, we've all had bosses like this, kind of a loose cannon, go a little bit overboard. Anybody been threatened to be burned alive? Hopefully no, I hope not. But I kind of actually picture Nebuchadnezzar looking a little bit like Tony from Fire Ninja, like a short guy, real angry, But we'll see. I don't know. There's no proof of that, But really, we all know those angry types who make insane demands and then blow up when things don't go perfect. And here's our reaction to this, right? So we do one of three things. So real quick there, blame, shame, and complain. And that's because they rhyme, and that's how you have to preach. Everything has to rhyme. So that's what they told me in Bible college. So no, I'm just kidding. But so blame, right? So here's what we do. We get confronted with this situation, and we haven't done anything wrong, right? But then we put, well, the instructions were clear, or Larry was asleep over there, or whatever it might be. We have a lot of teachers here, so I'm sure you can put a lot of blame on the students, right? Can't you do that? Fourth graders get pretty out of hand, Mom, don't they? So she's retired. She doesn't remember. She's blocked all that out. She's done. So we can blame our surroundings or our circumstances, right? So that's the first thing that we tend to do, deflect. Second one is this. We shame ourselves, right? So a lot of times, and I am not like this, but my wife kind of is, okay? So what we tend to do is take the blame even though we didn't do anything wrong. And then we feel bad about ourselves because we've disappointed someone, right? Like for instance, okay, if I am trying to, I don't know, make some paper, like spreadsheet or something like that, and the information is wrong, but I do it right, and it comes out the wrong way, like sometimes we have the tendency to come down on ourselves really hard for something that really isn't our fault. So that's shame. And then the last one is, I think the one where most of us are guilty of, right, is that we complain, right? We complain about our boss, complain about our employees or our coworkers or whatever. And really, we're just kind of spreading this negativity around. Now, I absolutely love that they give us another option here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego actually respond not the way that we typically do, but in a way that I think honors God. Let's read it. Let's read it together. 3:16 through 18. All right, it says this. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the fiery furnace, the God that we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand. But even if he doesn't, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image you have set up. Right? What a great response. And probably a pretty tough one. I mean, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are no strangers to Nebuchadnezzar's sort of crazy fits, you know. He's threatening to kill people all the time. And here's what we learn from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's response, is that a godly response is always the right response, right? See, here's kind of what I'm sure was going through their head, is they're like, well, Nebuchadnezzar is our boss, right? I mean, he's the king of this whole nation and empire. And we can't, go against him. He'll actually do these things that he's saying that he's going to do, right? But what they did was they, instead of obeying what their earthly master told them to do, they obeyed their heavenly master. And we kind of know from the story that it all works out. But we don't want to get ahead of ourselves too soon here. Sorry, 1 second. Oh, man. So we're celebrating 4th of July this weekend, actually Monday, tomorrow. And I just want to caution us as a church, not us, not this church, but kind of Christians in general. A lot of sermons are going to be preached today that are kind of like, hey, man, this country's going downhill, and we gotta rescue it, and we kind of do these things. We blame other people. And, it's full of crooks and liars, and a lot of that might be true, right? But I would submit this to you. We live in a land where we're free to worship. And my position is that we aren't becoming a godless nation because the godless are in power, but rather we're becoming a godless nation because the church is unwilling to stand up and respond with the bold and radical love that Jesus did, right? Like, remember the woman caught in adultery? It's like the way that the world works in the law was like, yeah, she's supposed to get stoned, right? She's supposed to die in that moment. But Jesus interfered and placed himself in between and totally interrupted the circumstance. We've kind of replaced our worship of this God with protests and Facebook posts and kind of these like weak imitations of what it truly means to follow after Christ, right? We need to serve a God who is, we do serve a God who has already declared victory, and we need to live like that. We need to stop expecting non-Christians to act like Christians and instead take the gospel of Jesus Christ to the world. Okay, so I'm done with my rant there. All right. We know this story, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We know how this one ends, right? And it's a lot like our story ends, right? Jesus comes and saves them from the flames, right? Remember Nebuchadnezzar's like, hey, didn't we only throw three guys in there? And there's a fourth, right? And an angel of the Lord came and protected them in the fiery furnace. And then Nebuchadnezzar kind of repents and says, hey, anybody who talks bad about these guys, God, all right, you're just not allowed, all right? Because he's powerful. And I think that's interesting. Jesus comes and makes fools of the naysayers like Nebuchadnezzar was. Remember when he said, what God can save you from my hand? Remember that? Oh, yeah, Jesus, right? Oh, and he did, and he's going to again. So, it's like, it's kind of funny how God set that up. Jesus comes and turns the agendas of man upside down for his glory and for his purpose. And I'm really happy about that, right? because it means that I don't have to put my faith in men or the systems of this world, right? I can place my faith in Jesus Christ, not just for salvation, but for everything else, right? I think we claim salvation as like our ticket to heaven, which absolutely it is, and that's a huge part of our Christian faith. But man, we're saved to more than that too. It's about everything that we do, and like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did, they understood the circumstance. Despite the circumstances, they understood the God that they worshipped, and they understand what Paul would write in Romans 12:1 and 2. If you guys remember, it says, "Therefore, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to him. This is your spiritual act of worship. Don't conform any longer to the pattern of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind," right? And then we'll be able to know what God's will is, right? I think we fall into patterns. Every one of us does, right? There's always something. Maybe it's the protection that our world sort of sets up for us. Maybe it's our 401k, or that nest egg, or maybe it's the police officers down the street. They're going to protect us, or maybe it's the house we live in, or the community, or whatever it is. I think we fall into these patterns, and if we're not careful, they can actually get in the way of the God that we serve. I mean, we remember, like Jesus, we exist, we live and breathe. Acts says we live and move and have our being because of what he's done, right? All right. Let's wrap up a couple things. Here's the first one, is that you are not alone. Remember we mentioned earlier, I don't know if you guys caught it, but Daniel was away when this was all going down, right? And so he's back with the king in the palace while Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are kind of doing the day-to-day. And oftentimes I think we can feel like that. Like we get together on Sunday morning and we're together and we're encouraging one another, and then Monday morning comes and like, oh man, I'm around these same people and I fall into these same things, and maybe it's friendships or family. Boy, that's a tough one. I mean, it's really hard to share Christ with your family, isn't it? It's hard to be a light in your family. But here's what I would say, is that you remember that you're not alone. Find someone and be encouraged by those around you. Second one is this, you were placed for a reason. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't pick their coworkers, these astrologers who just wanted to muddy everything up. And we don't really get to do that either. We are placed in the situation, whatever situation we're in, for a reason. Maybe you're later in years and you have this family or grandsons and great-grandsons, and you actually have an opportunity to build into them something that's really, really great, right? And I think that too often we let go of those opportunities. Remember that we were placed for a reason. And the last one is this, is that Jesus Christ turns the worst circumstances into the greatest celebrations. I don't know if you remember, but they actually are like kind of dancing inside the furnace. And we don't dance here, so don't get crazy. But they were celebrating the fact that they were delivered by their God. And I think that's great that Jesus took a horrible circumstance. Like, there's no way that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are going to get out of that furnace alive. Well, maybe not. Okay, I guess Jesus has a different plan. And we get to celebrate that. Here's the bottom line. The principles that we've talked about today, while we framed it in kind of the framework of a workplace, really apply to all aspects of our life. And whether we're 8 or 80, we live in a world full of people and relationships that God has called us to. So let's not squander those opportunities, but rather take hold of them. Jesus wins in the end, and so we have nothing to lose, really, right? But we have a whole lot to gain. And so that's my challenge for you guys this week. I'm going to pray, and then we'll dismiss. So, Lord Jesus, thank you so much just that you do love us, that you do care, and that like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we can trust that our response, a godly response, is going to honor you and ultimately work out for the best. Help us this week to just take opportunities seriously, to take hold of them, and really to just share the love of Jesus Christ with the world around us. We love you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.